Hello, everyone. This is William Del Pilar, and welcome to Fired Up California. I am your Californian conservative Latino. Yes, we do exist, and we are growing. So tonight, let's talk Armen Kurdian. He's a conservative candidate for California State Senate District 38. In doing my research, people, it kept wanting to give me District 32. So y'all got to be careful when you do your research out there sometimes when you're looking at AI, just a heads up. But we're here to find out where he stands on the issues and why he deserves our vote. But before we begin, do not forget to click the thumbs up and like while you listen. Make sure you bookmark grumblingsmedia.com. Follow us on your favorite platforms like YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, or Pandora under the handle Grumblings Media. And with that out of the way, let's get to it. We are going to interview Mr. Armen Kurdian. He is a conservative candidate for California State Senate District 38, a retired Navy captain with over 25 years of service. And just for the layman out there, once you reach Navy captain, you're talking bigwigs. You're talking the power brokers that make big decisions. In 25 years of service, he served this country valiantly and righteously. He's a decorated veteran with over 2,500 plus flight hours, holds 2 MBAs and a master's in aeronautical engineering. I bet you his home office probably has all those models. He's a husband, father, and he's a Vista resident, an active community leader, youth sports coach. He's a member of the Palomar Airport Advisory Committee. So if you got your complaints, send them in. He's also the vice president of the Veterans Writing Group of San Diego. And he's currently the vice president of West Coast operations at a defense contractor. Like I said, he's a serious player. He knows his stuff. He's been around the block. So with that, he's running to help champion veterans, the working families, and economic growth in North San Diego County. And with that, let us welcome Mr. Armen Kurdian. So Armen,
hey Bill.
It's good to have you aboard. For those not aware, Armen's been a guest with us a couple of times. I think we threw you for a loop with our Ukrainian take. It was probably
not at all. I love hard questions. It's always fun when you have some counterbalancing points.
So real quick, before we get into this, I have to ask you, what is your writing group about? Veterans Writing Group in San Diego. What's that all about?
Certainly. Just one quick correction. I'm not VP of that company anymore. I switched to another company. So still doing lots of great work related to Defense Department stuff. So anyway.
In other words, people, he's got a job.
I got a job. I got a job. Somebody writes my paycheck, just like so many other Californians. Actually, we have really high employment rates. So maybe not as many as there used to be.
Exactly.
So the Veterans Writing Group of San Diego County is a great organization. We try to bring in veterans, whether you're a ground pounder, aviator, you're in the Navy, Marines, what have you, and get your stories down on paper and publish them. The best part about our group, doesn't cost anything to be a member. It doesn't cost anything to get your story published. It doesn't cost anything to get editing. It doesn't cost anything for any of that. We are totally funded by grants and book sales and donations. Just earlier this year, we published our 5th book. So
wow.
If you are a veteran and you got a story to look at veteranswritinggroup.org and join us, send us a note, and let's get you published.
That's outstanding. Real quick, is it their life story or just a novel or whatever?
Anything. It could be could be an anecdote from their military history. It could be something humorous. It could be fiction. It could be poetry. I hate poetry, and I actually even wrote a poem myself, which is crazy. God, so, but yeah, whatever you want to write about related to your military history or coming home, there's a lot of stories about coming home.
I'm a veteran. I will look that up. I got that unfinished novel that's been in my head for 30 years. All right, let's get into the tough stuff here. You are running for Senate District 38, correct?
Yeah.
Real quick, before I ask you some more direct questions, tell me a little bit about your district. What's the makeup in terms of what propels your district? Is it manufacturing, service, retail? What's your district about?
Sure. So the district goes from Pacific Beach in San Diego County all the way up the coast, includes Carlsbad, Oceanside, my town of Vista, through Camp Pendleton into Orange County. It's about 950,000 people. It's about 54% white. It's about 20% Hispanic. You've got about 10 to 15% Asian and Asian Pacific Islander, and the rest is a different mix. It's very coastal, so there's a lot of tourism is involved there as well. There's a lot of businesses along the coast. Carlsbad has a large business park. Vista has a large business park as well. So very, very small business oriented. You see a lot of the larger Fortune 500 kind of businesses, a little bit more inland or in the city of San Diego proper, that you will. So it's very small business oriented, which is one of the pillars of my campaign. There is some agriculture, not as much as if you go further east, but that is a big part of it as well. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's quite the melting pot, to be quite honest. Quite diverse, and to the audience, I'm near there, and it's very diverse. He's right. Agriculture, strawberry fields, the artsy fartsy
Yep.
beach shops, the some of the big companies are inland in the Carlsbad area, I believe. So you're right. So you've got quite the mix of diversity. Right now, your district is represented by Catherine Blakespear. She's the incumbent. She's running. Doing my research here on her, I discovered that she actually kind of got density housing going into the Encinitas area against the will of the people to push back. In her defense, she's probably stuck between a rock and a hard place, but your job is to support the people and their will. And I think when you veer from that, you have to veer from that at times. But I think housing is an issue that is not complex, but has become complex. What does she get wrong about the people in this district, and how would you approach it differently?
Well, it kind of ruins the character of the area that you're living in when you start putting in high density housing in a place that wasn't designed for it or wasn't built for it. A lot of the coastal cities in San Diego County have a very unique kind of character to them, and large high density projects, I'm not against them per se. There are places and locations for them, but not in areas where there's like predominantly single family homes, or not doing something that's 7 stories in a city where that's normally like 3 stories is your max height for construction. Kind of taking it up one higher level, you see so many stuff coming out of Sacramento. I mean, similar to what Blakespeare did in Encinitas, but density bonuses. We're going to rezone this, and we're going to facilitate that. How many times have they actually addressed the cost of construction, the cost of actually building something?
Oh
It, it,
yeah,
it drives me crazy. When I was in the Navy, I believed in root cause analysis and understanding what the problem is. If you can't articulate the problem, then your solutions are not going to solve the problem. So,
exactly.
one of the things that I want to do is I want to address the cost of actually building. There's a lot of things that can be done to bring that cost down. Did you know that the state of California, the average cost for permitting for a single family home is nearly $30,000? The next highest state is Oregon at like about 15 or 16.
I knew
Right there.
that. I knew that, but I'm glad you brought it up. This is how I describe it to the audience, and my percentage may be wrong because that tends to change. But I used to tell my audience or people who, when I was serving, hey, look at it this way: 30 to 40% of the cost of the house must be paid up front before a shovel's even put in, whether the project happens or not. Those costs get eaten by us, and why we don't have affordable housing. So,
There you go.
Armen, I had this all nice laid out, but you brought up housing and density. So let's get into one of these propositions that just passed by the infamous Senator Scott Wiener, who you hope to become your peer, even though he's a Democrat in the Senate. He's a very controversial senator. He really has been pushing for this high density SB 79. To the audience, a quiet single family neighborhood near a trolley stop or near a bus stop that they determine is impactful. A developer can come in and propose a 6-story, 85-foot building with 50 units, including 10 affordable units, and the city can't block it and residents can't oppose it. That, in essence, is an example of what SB 79 can do. It overrides local zoning to mandate high density housing near transit hubs. Your thoughts on that, based on what you just said with Encinitas or some of these other places in terms of SB 79? It's passed. What can we do about it? What do you plan on doing about it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Well, that's like the least bad thing that Senator Wiener has done up in Sacramento. We'll save that for another conversation. Uh,
True.
so there's another problem that folks don't actually talk about a lot. So you build that high density. Let's say they even do it, like you say, it's by right. The city, the local jurisdiction does not have discretionary authority to say no, you can't do it. They still have to go through all the permits and all the coding, so they still got to check all the boxes. But at the end of the day, the city can't say, well, this is not in keeping with the style. The other problem is there's traffic requirements. There's water, there's power, there's sewer, there's cable, internet, all of these things that you need in order to make these kinds of places work. And not only that, but when you see some of these, when you couple with some of the other laws that currently exist in Sacramento, density bonuses means reduced setbacks, reduced parking requirements. The developer is not even required to build enough parking spots for all the people that are going to live in that location. So where the heck are they going to put their cars? Oh, well, they're all going to take mass transit. This is the lack of thinking and the lack of situational awareness when folks in Sacramento have a good idea in their heads and they don't stop to think about it. Or maybe they do and they just don't care. They just want to show that they're actually doing something. Maybe they're in a developer's pocket. I don't know. But
Armen, you're right. Most of the I can relate because as having served, I dealt with a lot of issues with the planning group, with developers. They quickly want to be your friends. So I put people like you. You're in a tough spot. We do need housing, but there's that line, and I think Scott Wiener's crossed that line to destroy. You talked about character, and to the audience, what he means by character is like where I live is a rural country area. We've got a suburb here now, which goes against everything that what we want, how we look. And my final question before we move on from SB 79, what do you think will happen? Do you think legally the pushback's going to be there? Courts are going to block this? What do you eventually see happening with SB 79 if we don't become a Republican legislature to overturn it?
Well, I think some of the better arguments that they have to maybe fix this law is like some of the things I talked about. And it's like what are all the stuff that has to go around this kind of manufacturing, this kind of construction, in order to be able to handle that kind of an increased load for individuals. So that's something that can be done. But we've already had SB 9, which was facilitating ADUs, SB 10, a lot of these other bills that passed the Senate where there is increased zone, there's more facilitation, and there really aren't any legal challenges to it because there's nothing unconstitutional about it. It just might upset a lot of people, but as you know, as the Supreme Court has said, bad policy doesn't make something unconstitutional.
Maybe seeing these 7-foot story high rises. Of course, I'm using some hyperbole here, not quite high rise, but you know what I mean. Maybe that'll get some of these middle of the road and these progressive Democrats a real. It's easy to be a progressive until it hits you in your backyard. Like we're seeing that. Yep. We're seeing that with the lithium batteries. Democrats and Republicans coming together for that. All right. So, Armen, you called Sacramento a place where common sense goes to die. So, real quick, what pushed you to run? But what's the biggest disconnect between everyday Californians and our needs and what Sacramento keeps delivering?
That's such an interesting question because the answer is kind of evolved. It's always been kind of the same thing, but it's also kind of evolved. I believe in public service. I love serving my community. I love helping people. I love solving problems, and I'm a patriot. I'm conservative. I believe in fiscal conservatism, all those great things, and that gets me up in the morning. But lately, over the last couple of months, especially in the light of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think it's really crystallized. And if for no other reason than to supplant somebody who doesn't have a good character in Sacramento, someone who is completely and totally disconnected, has a cognitive dissonance between themselves and the people that they are elected to represent, if for no other reason than the fact that I can't stomach the fact that so many of my elected leaders simply aren't qualified for the positions that they are. Just listening to them on the dais, whether it's a city council or a school board or a community college board. I was listening to a board meeting the other day, to put somebody there that can actually talk rationally and somebody who can work across the aisle. Because, at the end of the day, a lot of the goals, I would say all, but a lot of the goals Republicans and Democrats have are the exact same, but so divergent on the paths to actually get there. And that's
You're being polite. You're being polite. Yeah, Armen, you and I are probably closer to the age. I would have believed that when we were in our teens or 20s, 30s, maybe into our 40s, but I truly believe they've gone so far to the left that I don't know if what you say is true. We got to get back to that point. And the reason I say
Not
that
all. They're
is
strong.
you mentioned Charlie Kirk. In our backyard in the San Diego area, we saw what happened in Chula Vista, California. For those of you not aware, Mayor John McCann, the mayor of Chula Vista, wanted to give a few words of honor to Charlie Kirk, and the Progressive City Council walked out on him. So real quick, I have to ask you this question. I've been involved in politics, not as deeply as I once was. In researching you, it's obvious your knowledge, SB9, your intellectualness. All this are huge positives because of your background and how you raise yourself up. But one of the criticisms I got is, he's kind of aloof. He's kind of nerdy out there. We live in a new era. Armen, you're in the camera, I'm sure, every single day, unlike what it was 30 years ago, where you got this TV bite or this radio. Now it's everywhere. And you're a military, you're a Navy captain. To the audience, as I said in my intro, once you hit a certain level, that's the big time. It's like going from a small business, selling it, then you're on the boardroom of a corporation. There's a difference. You're very intellectual, very smart, very nerdy, as you said. How are you going to relate to the average common person who may look at you and go, well, I like him, and that's not a knock as much as it's
No.
who you are. So but politics is perception. How do you plan on crossing that bridge?
Well, the main thing for this race is actually relatability. Because if you go against somebody like Blakespeare, issue like boom, 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 you're not going to win, because you're just going to get buried by money and mail and advertisement. So you got to kind of go around. And as you say, it's relatability, it's connection. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a little league coach. I make great homemade preserves, and I collected comic books for a while. So it's I use humor a lot, and I do that a lot more often than I think when I'm like in front of a live audience.
Mm-hmm.
I went and spoke to the Carlsbad Republican Women and Oceanside, and I got the crowd laughing quite a bit. Throwing some jokes there, to create some levity. And that's kind of who I am. I've always had a really quirky, bizarre sense of humor, and I don't know, maybe the nerdiness will kind of work. It's like he's not as somebody who's aloof, because I actually care.
Exactly.
Connecting with people on a familial level, like I mentioned there's like about 19-20% Hispanic registered voters. Most of them are actually Democrat, but they're sick and tired of what's happening up there, and they need a voice. So, connecting with them on their level through, I speak pretty decent Spanish, and I can throw in a couple of jokes. I did that during my city council campaign, and I got the non-English speakers. I got them to laugh a little bit as well too. So that's where we're going. That's how I want to do it, basically, by connecting and showing that I'm a regular guy. And I got some quirky ideas for some ads and some stuff that'll probably get some attention, and say that he's not a totally serious guy, but he knows what he's talking about.
Good. And I see you're out there a lot, and I love to see that. I loved Andrew Hayes. He's my state was a wannabe to be a state assembly representative. And when Carl DeMaio said he was going to run, I got in an argument with my friends who were all for Andrew, and they're like, "Why?" I said, "Carl's going to crush him. He's out there talking to the people every day. He's not afraid. What you see from Carl, whether you like him or not, is what you get." So I'm glad to see you out there. I'm glad to see you doing that. Now, California ranks in the bottom 10 nationally. You said families are being crushed by gas, rent, and energy costs. And yes, we are. So we have a middle class exodus right now. So what would it take to make California livable again for working families? And how do you plan to cut costs without growing government or handing out more subsidies? And that's a tough question, because the legislature is 2/3. They don't need Armen. They don't need the Republicans. They can pass anything. So it's a twofold question. How do you plan to convince your peers, hey, we got to stop growing this budget here where we don't have the money to cover it?
Oh no, they don't need me. They don't want me up there. That's for darn
that's
sure.
True.
This is going to sound a little flippant, and a little funny, but I'm going to go up there and stop voting on things that are really bad. It's because, and I say that because there is so much that comes out of Sacramento that's just a hot mess. It's like, how could you possibly even vote for this? Like, what are you thinking about? Mm-hmm. So the philosophy, the doctrine for Armen Kurdian, in the future is like, I'm not going to vote for something that's going to make your life more expensive or more complicated, and I'm going to vote for something that's going to make your life cheaper and simpler. It's really just kind of that simple. There's so much that comes out that it's just unnecessary. Meanwhile, roads are going unbuilt. Public school enrollment is at the lowest level since 1990 in this state. Meanwhile, homeschooling and private schooling has gone up. But at the same time, you can't use your 529 to pay for private schooling, for pre-college education. You can in some states, but you can't do it in California. Why? Teachers don't like that. It's competition for the schools. So that's a big problem. Small business creation is tanking. Every small business owner I've spoken to, well, just about every single one, is saying, yeah, it's really hard. It's hard to hire. We got all these rules, regulations, and stuff. Did you know that if you have a $0 tax bill and you say, for whatever reason, you accidentally forget to file your taxes, you could owe thousands of dollars in fines on a $0 tax bill? I mean, and how does that make any sense? Sure, there might be consequences for your permitting and your business license. That's all fine. But to fine somebody thousands of dollars in a business startup where you're trying to get going and you have a $0 tax bill, I mean, why do we have stuff like that actually happening? So it's
to take it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. I'm going to try to shoot for tax cuts. Maybe good luck with that. I'm going to try and make military retirement pensions 100% untaxable, because it's still driving veterans out of the state. I'm going to try to eliminate requirements for new construction, such as solar or other kind of CEQA requirements, which add tens of thousands of dollars to the construction of a new home unnecessarily. If you don't want solar in your house, then don't put it in. You can always put it in later and put it at your own expense. But let's bring that cost down. You have 3 generations of people living in rental houses because they can't afford to buy a house, or a house isn't there. And we got a lot of people in the state who shouldn't be here, who are taking up all the housing. So it's a tremendous number of problems. You're not going to be able to solve them all, but at the very least, if we can get 14 Republican senators in Sacramento, then we've broken the supermajority, and that will slow things down quite a bit.
Yes, that will force negotiations. You mentioned parental rights there. You have said that Sacramento has trampled parental rights. So real quick, because I want to get into SB 495, since we're talking about caregiver authorization and parental rights with this. But would you support school choice? And you mentioned private. I'm okay with public schooling, the numbers going down, and homeschooling going up. I was born and raised in Panama. Education is the number one form of indoctrination and to subdue the masses. And I think we've lost the battle with how you see socialism on the rise, communism on the rise, Mamdani in Minnesota with these individuals. Would you support school choice or voucher programs? I assume you would, based on what you already said. So my real issue here is SB 495. It allows non-parents to authorize medical and educational decisions for minors without parental consent. So, for example, a 14-year-old student is living temporarily with a family friend. The adult signs a caregiver affidavit and takes a child to go to mental health counseling and school accommodations without notifying the parents. That's just one aspect of 495. I'm not sure how you're looking at it, but talk to us a little bit about that, your angle on it, actually.
So, yeah, real quick, AB 495, the way it was first written was just absolutely awful. There was no controls, no court involvement whatsoever. The revised edition is a little bit better, but there are still gaps that would allow basically somebody to come in and claim that they're a caregiver and make medical decisions on behalf of your child. So it's, Republicans would not be opposed to this if it did what the proponents of the bill actually said, and only that. But that's not what the case is. But you look at that. You look at this, the laws that were passed that prevent teachers from informing parents if their kids are expressing gender dysphoria. You look at the law that was passed that all high school student ID cards have to have the LGBTQIA plus suicide prevention hotline. So if I'm not in that category and I'm feeling that, I need a suicide prevention, I see that, I'm not valued as much as one of these other people. How is that actually helpful? I am in favor of school choice. I am not opposed to public education whatsoever. I'm a kid of public education too. I'm only opposed to it insofar as the quality of education in the state is absolutely awful. And for folks to have to go out of the system who can't afford to do so, then I'm all in favor of school choice. I wish it didn't have to be like that, because it's so poor.
So right. So we only have a few minutes here with you left, Armen. Final words on 495. I cut you off. I apologize. Final comments on 495.
Yeah, Governor Newsom finally passed it. I'm very worried that some child of some immigrant family that gets deported, whatever, is going to get into a really bad situation, and it's not going to be good, and we're not going to know about it because this person is supposedly a guardian or a caregiver. It's really serious. There were already laws on the books for this, and frankly, if the parents do get deported, I think that child is better off staying with their parents. Why would you want to separate them?
Exactly. And what Armen did not mention about this is also the loopholes. A complete stranger could literally come in, claim this, and make it happen. I'm not exaggerating it, but I'm pushing the boundaries. But
Yeah.
that's the problem with these laws is there's always Murphy's Law. Things you don't actually see that can happen will happen. So this law kind of scares me. Let's do a couple minutes of a lightning round here, if you don't mind. Let's move on to the transgender SB 749. It's a state appointed commission. In essence, what they want to do is make it more formal for boys to play in girls' sports. Your thoughts on the transgender in girls in boys and girls' sports?
Boys have no place in girls' sports. If you want transgender kids to play, they can play of the sex of their birth, or we create a whole new category for them.
Okay, this one's here a little bit more tongue in cheek, a little bit of fun here, real quick. Katie Porter, but seriously, on the flip side, have you endorsed either one, Sheriff Bianco or Steve Hilton? But real quick, your thoughts on Katie Porter, the self destruction.
It's par for the course for a lot of Democrats in this state at every level of government. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. And nobody likes her. We'll see if she's going to be able to get past it. I like both Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco. I've met them both. I think they both have some strong positives. I would have liked to have seen Rick Grinnell run for governor. I would have liked to have seen Kevin Kiley run for governor, but we can't have everything we want. So it'll probably be one of them. We'll see who can come out on top.
Okay, so real quick, we know where everybody stands with Prop 50. That's the gerrymandering, the removed congressional representation of Republicans. What would you tell the people right now to do? We only got a couple of weeks left.
Get your ballot in. Do it now. Talk to folks. Bring it up in conversation. We need every vote that we possibly can. I was at Reform California for 8 hours a week ago Sunday, the week before that, moving envelopes. 1.6 million letters went out to voters all over the state, letting them know how bad it was. But the pro Prop 50 crowd has spent a lot of money to take some of these votes away. I think it's really bad when politicians put their thumb on the scale and politically gerrymander their districts. And I know Republicans do it as well. And I'm not really in favor of that either. It silences the voice of the people. We should stop playing identity politics. We all have the same wants. We want good stuff for our families, food, energy, gas prices, all that stuff that you talk about. Prop 50 is a very, very bad thing for all of Californians. I think some Democrats are going to regret it as well.
I agree. Now, final question before we get to your closing comments here real quick. I saw you were supportive of President Trump with the riots and ICE peaceful protests. They weren't peaceful protests. You thought it was okay to go there, protect federal buildings. Now, the powers, the elitists, they're screaming the high heaven because they're talking San Francisco now. But in interviews with business owners, people on the street, they want the federal agents to come in. Your thoughts on the potential San Francisco scenario here?
Let's talk the whole country. I've never seen elected leaders work so hard to protect criminals in their cities, in their jurisdiction. And where's the equity for the people who live in low-income neighborhoods who've got to deal with this kind of stuff?
All right. Okay, so Armen, final question here is twofold. What's something that voters won't find on your campaign ads or something? And you kind of given it out already with comics, you like preserves, but is there anything else? And if people remember one thing from this interview, what should it be?
You got a choice. You can't keep voting the same way, folks. And just because I have better ideas than my opponent doesn't mean that I'm going to win. Just because I might have a better resume doesn't mean that I'm going to win. Campaigns, races are about campaigns. Elections are about, campaigns. They're less about issues in this state. The folks who got the better organized campaign, the better kind of messaging, not necessarily the message, tend to win. Don't just think because that I make a lot more sense than my opponent that I'm going to win.
In other words, every vote counts.
And work towards it.
So. Every vote counts. And that's it, people. Armen, thank you for tuning in. Everybody, thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit like and share the podcast. Mike. And remember these stories. when voting in politics come up, convince your fellow Californians we got to vote for Armen Kurdian. I am a conservative, so I am a bit biased here. And if you can, volunteer to fight and work on Prop 50. And with that, do not forget the bookmark us at grumblingsmedia.com and like,
Reach
share
out to me on
this
Instagram.
podcast. I'm sorry?
Reach out to me on Instagram.
Yes. I will put all of Armen's
Very
contact
good.
information in the description. Armen, once again,
Thanks so much.
thank you for tuning in.
Take care,
And
Bill.
everybody, we'll see you next time.
Out
Hey
here.
everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.